So, are you ready for the night watchman tour? Yeah. Good, so am I. And you know what? You know what? Come closer. Huge cat. Why not? It was like this. Well, loud enough to make everybody wake up. And all the people who heard the signal ran out of their houses, trying to fight the fire as quick as possible. It was the biggest fear people had. And around the market square, we were called patricians, the noble families, and the biggest privately owned building in the whole city. It's right outside. And there's something special. Next to the entrance, there are these chains with a handle. See them? These were the doorbells, like people used to have them long ago. If one pulls the bells inside go. But not anymore. Because everybody tries. And the people who live there, they don't like them. They fix them. Interesting detail is those who own the house and live inside are descendants of the noble family, which moved in more than 300 years in 1697. And they're still in it. It's not the same people, but the same family, which is amazing. And there's something else very typical. All the big houses have it. I mean the wide gate. It had to be so wide that a carriage could drive into the court. Imagine a big court behind a big house. People got a barn and a stable, animals and vegetables. A city in the old days was like a big village. Sure, it didn't look like it. It was much bigger, bald, and forty. But it smelled like it. And even worse, because there was a tannery and a skinnery in town. Not just one. The stench coming from there was really amazing. And the streets were out of dirt, no cover. The animals were in the streets in the daytime. Thousands of poultry, but also goats and pigs doing their part everywhere. And the people were throwing it out of the window. Everything. In the early morning, it was kind of dangerous to walk in the streets. Because after people got up, they emptied their chamber pots through the window into the street. And they were told to give a short warning before. So they were kind of fair. But seconds later it happened. And it's kind of tricky. Because when somebody shouts down, people in the street look up. And it was all in the streets, all that dirt and crap. Just one idea to get rid of it. They used to have a gutter in the street, twice a week, every week. Had to sweep the dirt laying in front of his house into that gutter. Then they hoped for next rain to come and wash it downhill in the moat or in the valley. But that was more a hope than a good idea. It didn't really work. In July, August, when it was hot and dry, nothing went downhill. But it stank so horrible that all the rich people who could afford having a solid house on the countryside went out of town. And because of all the dirt in the streets and the stored food in the houses. And you have to know, each family had to store grain for a year to rest, to be ready for a siege or a bad harvest. So there was a lot of grain in the attics and a lot of dirt in the streets. And that was most attractive for who? Rats. And what happened because of the rats?
Plague.
Bubonic or black plague. It was a special kind of flea living on rats. The flea got this bacteria, killing all these millions of people. And it had started far from here in China, making its way over the Silk Road down to Europe. And when they were loading up ships in Crimea with goods from the Silk Road, determined to go to Italy, these rats went on board as well. Because that's what rats are doing. And a lot of these ships never arrived. Because the whole crew died on the way. But a few made, eaten Italian home. And those who were still alive got thrown aboard. And the rats did too. And there it was. That's how the plague came to Europe on the ships of the merchants. Between 1347 and 1352. That was when the first wave of plague came over Europe. It took at least a third of Europe's population. Average mortality in cities was 40%. The peak here was Florence in Italy with 80%. And on the countryside it was also different. Some areas were almost wiped out of people, and other areas not so much. And the hardest part was, more than 90% of those who got the plague and died got no last rites. Because there was no priest showing up. Not because they refused to go, or they were too scared. It was vice versa. They were amongst the first victims because they were. But it was contagious. And imagine how close a priest can get to a person that's dying. Maybe just able to whisper his last words into the priest's ear. Real close. And there weren't that many priests in the city. Pretty soon they were all gone. That meant for all the rest, nobody's there and they died. No last rite. And that meant going where? Hell. Direct. For eternity. And that was the real drama about this disease. To die knowing hell is next. This dimension of fear that this people have, we cannot imagine, rational as we are nowadays, about this kind of thing. More or less. And besides plague, there were other diseases, lots of wars and hunger. People could die from simple infections. Life expectancy was low, childhood mortality, and so on. I could continue. But I don't want to make everything negative. There might have been also some positive aspects of life. But I don't know. So my conclusion is, and I think you agree, there were no good old days. And one last detail. You know, when people got the plague, the first symptom they were showing was they started sneezing. So when you people say, God bless you, when somebody sneezes, that comes from the time of the plague. When sneezing could mean, ooh, this person's gonna die soon. That's the real background of that plague. Really.
That's why it's called night watchman.
Now, before we walk to this gate, I want to tell you something about it. It's one of the 6 gates of Rothenburg, and it was the safest one. No enemy tried to get up there. There's just a park and a cliff. We'll see that pretty soon once we get outside. And there's something else special. Once we walk in, you will see in the first big wooden door is a small cut into, working independent of the big. They call this a manhole. Because when the gatekeepers opened it, the hole was just big enough for one man to fit through. That's why manhole. It was in every city on every gate, always for the same reason. It was for residents who made a certain kind of mistake. Guess which? By the way, nothing serious, no crime, just. Out too late. Missing curfew. It was last chance for latecomers getting in. You know, it was too dangerous to open a big gate at night. Why should a whole city get in danger for a latecomer? The danger was an enemy could have tried to get in the same moment. And it didn't need a lot of enemy to destroy the city. A few of them were in. The only thing they had to do was to start a fire. Or even better, several fires. One from every direction. Easy to do. And that was it. If that happened, the city was lost. So there was a permanent threat. People had to think about security all the time. And should they do? Every evening with the beginning of darkness. That means different in the seasons. All the bells were rung from all the clock towers to inform everyone who was still outside to get back. The bells told them when it was time to hurry home. They had an hour to make it. If they missed it, they had a problem. Because all the big gates were shut. Last chance then getting in? No matter. But it was expensive to use. The gatekeepers asked for a fine. Because without a fine, everybody would have been late. Every 5 minutes, people would have knocked at that door all night through. But once it's expensive, it's different. The fine educated. To be home in time, next time. And that was the long story of the small man. Now let's go and have a look. Now look, when you get closer, it's right down there. It's really small.
That is tiny.
And it's in the original door from 1555. The number is somewhere there. It's the original door. It's oak wood. It's dry in here. I'm sure it's here in another 200 years. As solid as it is. Anyway, have a look when you get there. Last chance for latecomers. look back, isn't that romantic? Picturesque. These are the garden custom house. These half-round buildings with the steep roof. Looks great. Huh? And now look over there, another great view. There's the southern end of Rothenburg. And you can see the walls going all around town, more than 4 kilometers of length. It's pretty unique in Europe. And when you look down there, you can see we're on the edge of a cliff. If you can't see it, just believe it. It's going straight down into the Tauber Valley. Tauber is the name of the creek down there. And we have this cliff on 3 sides around Rothenburg. No enemy tried to get up there. And it didn't look like now. Now it's like a jungle. In the old days, this all was a vineyard. 2 reasons. Vineyards are structured, easy to guard. An enemy would be seen immediately coming, trying to get up. And the other reason was? Wine. You know, people needed lots of wine because they could not drink any water. Water was full of bacteria. It could ruin your health. You could even die drinking water. But everything that was fermented, all kinds of alcohol, beer, wine, cider, was free from bacteria and safe to drink. And everybody did it on a permanent basis. But it was less alcohol than today, only half. But once you got enough, you still got to move. And also the kids got it because it was safe. So growing up children back then was so much easier. Again, 2 things. There was discipline. There were rules. And they worked. And in the evening, these kids got a little shot, and it was quiet. No discussions. It was so cool. I would say a few things they did better than we do now. This is one. Because now this is all chaos. I had it. I know what I'm saying. I'm not better. But back to security. Once you have 3 sites safe by nature like we got it, you can concentrate almost all your manpower on one side when there was an enemy showing up. And this is the side over there. Let's call it the flat side. There's no valley, no cliff. By the way, it's where you came in. You must have seen the high wall. And did you walk the wall? You can. You can walk on a rampart, which is very special and exciting. Open night and day, free of charge. Imagine that. And back in the old days, the citizens were standing there in a high position, shooting down on all this enemy coming. Our main enemy were the neighbor cities, the Bishop of Würzburg and the Count of Nuremberg, to mention just the worst 2, because they tried it so often. But they never made it. Not the 2 I mentioned, and not all the other enemy we had. This city wasn't taken until the 30 Years' War, which lasts from 1618 to 1648. And we got the city rights 1274. And Rothenburg was taken first time in 1631. Not bad. But then it happened in only 3 days. And it was changing everything. It was the beginning of the end of Rothenburg. And the one who did it was General Tilly, leader of the Imperial Catholic Army. So you have to know, it was a religious war and Rothenburg was Protestant. And there was this huge Catholic army of 40,000 men outside of Rothenburg, end of October 1631, when they ran into a problem. that turned then into our problem. Can you imagine what could stop 40,000 people moving out? Because that's what the problem was. No. Weather. It was rain. It was raining like crazy for a whole week. And you can maybe imagine what kind of streets people got back in those days. It was all mud. And these troops got hundreds of carriages, wagons, cannons. They made no miles anymore. They got stuck in the dirt running out of food. Everybody was hungry and freezing. After the rain, it got cold. So there was a huge army in a desolate situation. They had to have a winter quarter, a dry spot, enough to eat, urgently. And the general picked us, Rothenburg, sending a mounted messenger to inform us that this is going to happen, that they are on their way to us, and we should be ready when they arrive. Have everything organized for them. Open the gates, let them in, and supply them for the winter. This was a shocking news. We were 6,000, men, women, children, and 40,000 wanted to come in. And they were not nice guests, not soldiers, but mercenaries. The only thing they wanted was plunder and steal. Take our wives and daughters, our money and possession, our storage, our animals, maybe our belief. And we should let them in and let them do all this? No way. These were brave people here. And the town fathers of Rothenburg decided that it's better to stand up and fight and hold the city. And we dared to. And I have to tell you, that didn't work. There were too many of them. Once they realized that we won't let them in, we were shooting from a distance against our walls with their big cannons. And we answered the fire as good as we could. But then on the third day of the attack, they hit the powder tower, which was a tower on the wall, a part of the fortifications. And all the gunpowder that we still had was stored right there. And then it blew up. That was the moment when we found out, that's not smart. You have all the gunpowder in one spot, but too late. Heavy explosion, a gap in the wall, powder tower crashed. That was it. Now we surrendered, hoping for mercy. Funny idea. We were staying for 3 months. No mercy. In the city and in the nearby villages. They were killing hundreds of our people. They brought diseases in. Rothenburg was empty, plundered. But they didn't burn it last, because there was a deal. We paid a high ransom, and they took it away. And Rothenburg still stood. But the war continued another terrible 17 years. And now the city was too weak to be defended. And something positive turned into negative. And that were the trade routes. You know, in peace times, they were great. They brought people money, goods, and positive things. But in war times, they brought troops, bandits, marauders. Quartering and plundering was like endless. Because sooner or later, everybody was coming along here on this intersection. Friend or enemy, you could never tell. After half the war was over, they had forgotten why it once had started. And when this war was finally over, after 30 years, it seemed endless for the people who lived back then. And it was the most brutal war in history. This was a poor, forgotten place. We had lost way more than half of our people in the city and 70% in the villages. And for a long time, we could not recover from this. For the next 250 years, nothing happened. People had no money to modernize their city. Plus, no motivation. And there was no need to. So many houses were standing empty. So many people had died. So nothing happened. And that's the only reason why Rothenburg is so well preserved. It was preserved by poverty. And the wealth of today bases on poverty of yesterday. We just had to wait long enough until tourism started. It took forever. And we didn't know it's coming. But then finally, 1880, 1890, It was the Romantic era of European art. There were some famous painters and poets showing up here. And they loved this place. They talked about it to newspapers and magazines. Things were published, and soon after the first visitors arrived. And since a few decades, Rothenburg is world famous and rich again, like it was long ago. Sure, in between, there was a long break, when nothing happened at all. But here we are again, back on the map, with your support. Good to see you here. Could you look? Are there more coming? Hold on. Wrong one. Now there's the last story about recent history, about times of World War II, to make the last centuries complete. And I guess most of you don't know that Rothenburg was bombed by the US Air Force in March 45. And it was destroyed by 40% within the old walls. It happened for a special reason. A few weeks earlier, Nuremberg was bombed and mostly destroyed. It's a big city, 50 miles south from here. And there was a German general who left battered Nuremberg, escaping into Rothenburg with all his Nazi soldiers who survived it there, giving order to hold this city to the last man. Not a good idea. The front line of the American army was really close, and they found out what's going on, that all these troops were in here, what kind of order was given. And then it happened. On the 31st of March, 1940, there were 16 military aircraft, so-called Marauders, flying above Rothenburg, dropping these bombs down, which destroyed eastern and northern part of the old city. Thank God it was a foggy day. The pilots up there in the sky, they couldn't really identify their target. So they didn't hit the city center. Like where we went around on the Torture night, for instance, there was no doubt. But northeastern part looked horrible. By the way, it's when you drive in with a car, the main gate. All the houses right and left, you're gone. And the next plan was to destroy the rest of Rothenburg by artillery. General Devers of the American army was preparing that. And he was close by. There wasn't much to prepare. He was almost ready to go when he got a call in the last moment from America. On the other end of the line was John J. McClure. He was Deputy Secretary of War, and he knew about the beauty of Rome. He knew it's a medieval city, and he kind of liked it. But he never had been here before. You know who was here instead? His mom. Twice. Before World War II, she came as a tourist to Rothenburg. She loved it. She took a painting of Rothenburg showing the walls and fortifications back home. It was on the walls of his parents' home in New York. Little John Jay grew up with that painting. And he was so fascinated. He never forgot all this for his whole life. And then much later, as an adult, he was in his high position. And when he heard about the news that Rothenburg should be totally destroyed by artillery, he called his general and he said, "Listen, Devers will not destroy Rothenburg if they surrender. It's a medieval city, let's give them an option." And so it happened. because he got involved in the right moment. We got this kind of choice. And one of the best things was when this news was coming in about this auction, the German general was not in town. Perfect time. He had forbidden any negotiations. Like Hitler had forbidden it to all of his generals, even at the end of the war. But this guy had left Rothenburg for a few days, installing a substitute command who was now responsible. And he was a guy from the Needle City. He was a great man. Because you know what he did? He walked down into the valley. There was a jeep of the American army with a white flag on top. And a few people inside waiting for a reaction. Or not. And he walked down and he said, "It's your city. I hand it over. I'll be gone in the morning. With all my men, I guarantee." And so it happened. But it was risky. It was treason what he did. He would have been shot immediately. But he did it. And the next day, the German troops went out of town. The American army occupied it. And 5 weeks later, on the 8th of May, the war was over in Europe. And we still had our city. We lost a part of it, but not the heart of it. Because of this too. An American and a German, they both saved Rothenburg from total destruction. Then the war was over. But we still had a problem. There was no money to reconstruct the destroyed part of the city. You know, this was a bankrupt country. We lost the war. There was nothing, no money, no material. But people here had a good idea. And you know, that's what you should have. When you don't have any money. A good idea. Which was in this case asking the whole world for help. There was an article written by our tourist officials. It was sent to every bigger newspaper worldwide. In this article we said, "Please, you people out there who are friends of Rothenburg, Germany, the only thing we need right now is money." And we said, "Please help us, some money. And if you do it, it's a certain amount, we'll put your name on our wall." We offered that one could buy a meter or several meters of our wall symbolically and have his name there. That's what you see when you walk on the ramparts. There are hundreds of names from all over the world. First the name of the person and the city or country. And then how many meters from there. So when you see 1M, it means 1 meter. And not to forget, John J. McCloy came to Rothenburg in 1948 after the war. And he was on the balcony of the town hall with all the local celebrities around him. And the square was packed with hundreds of citizens giving applause for what he did. And he became the first honorable citizen of Rothenburg after World War II. He really deserved it. And by the way, nothing happened to that German major. Nobody went behind him after the war for treason or whatever. So everything turned out good. And really, you should walk the wall. It's kind of special. Not only because of the names, also it's kind of a feeling. And maybe you can take yourself back in time and imagine you would stand there hundreds of years ago in an old uniform, shooting with an old rifle, so to slit in the wall, down to the enemy, or getting shot by the enemy. It's not so cool. And when you turn to the other side, you look inside, you can see how people live. You can look at their yards and houses and everything. It's also interesting. It's not forbidden. So many reasons to walk the wall. Don't miss it. Now you see, we are back where we started. This was the night Watchman tour. Thank God it did. And last thing you should do before you leave was to pray. It was €9 for adults, 4 for students, no charge for kids under 2. And I say, thanks for coming.
All right, Mark.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can do this, and then I'll pay you back.